Hello and good morning. This is Chris. Just some random thoughts here. It's really interesting looking at the country today. Um, I am a Cold War era Army veteran who stood against Soviet communism back in the day. So yes, I've dealt with communists before. I've stood against them before, and if I have to, I will again. That's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about something that's more sinister. You see, I always wondered why, when Obama was in office, whenever Kim Jong Un, or whatever fat boy's name over in North Korea said, or, started trouble, Obama always pussied out and knuckled under. That's because sitting in front of me, I read a book called The Naked Communist. It was written by a man named Cleon Skousen. Now, these 45 communist goals are related to his book, The Naked Communist, which I read the part about the so-called grandfather of communism, Karl Marx. It strips away all the propaganda and looks directly at the person, and he goes into great detail telling you, like in this case, about Karl Marx. And how Karl Marx is, I see that all over the United States today. I read the part about Karl Marx. He is one of the grandfathers of communism. He, along with Friedrich Engels, how you pronounce it, got together and wrote the Communist Manifesto. Now, one thing I learned, and I recall very strongly in the book about him, was that he was very indolent. Now, for those who aren't hip on what that means, is he was lazy. He did not hold a job his entire life, but rather he spent his life complaining about capitalism because he could not compete. He didn't have the skills, the character, the fortitude like other people to get out into the world and secure a living for he and his family. Tells you a lot about today in the U.S., doesn't it? Remember, during Obama, he increased the number of people on welfare in the United States to unprecedented numbers. See, when I was growing up, I was born in the 60s, but through the 70s, I was able to, consciously I was aware of what was going on around me. I mean, a kid doesn't really care about, communism at that time because, you're a kid. But I remember people had jobs, they were working jobs, they had homes, they would have cars, they would get a boat so they can go out on lakes and fish or whatever, and they would really enjoy life. They would work and they would play. That's a good life. There's nothing wrong with it. But somewhere along the line, the liberals, the leftists, took over and just blew this country up. And that's why they hate Trump, because they didn't get to finish what they wanted. I recall during the first election with Obama, he and Hillary had some sort of meeting. They had tricked the media, and they had a private meeting. And I think from a logic point of view or a common sense point of view, what they did is Obama says, okay, you support me, and then what I do is when my time's up, then I'll support you, and we'll let you come in and let you finish off with the coup de grace. But that didn't happen. The United States, the people got sick and tired of socialism being shoved down their throats. They got sick and tired of being Gestapo'd by Obama and his IRS and his cronies. Criminal, really criminal. And what really gets me is, I believe it's United States Code 18. I'm not exactly sure, but there's the United States Code about subversion, sedition, and treason against the United States. And I'm wondering, why has nobody on the left been arrested for all the crimes that were committed in the last 8 years? At least the last 8 years under Obama. But here I'm sitting in front of me. I have on my laptop The Naked Communist 45 Communist Goals. On January 10th, 1963, Congressman Albert S. Herlong Jr. of Florida read a list of 45 communist goals into the congressional record. The list was derived from researcher Cleon Skousen's book, The Naked Communist. These principles are well worth revisiting today in order to gain insight into the thinking and strategies of much of our so-called liberal elite. Number 1. They say the U.S. should accept coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. Number 2. The U.S. should be willing to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. Now note, these encapsulate the Kennan Doctrine, which advocated for the containment of communism. Establishment figures supporting the amoral containment policy at least implicitly worked with the communists in scaring the wits out of the American people concerning atomic war. President Ronald Reagan undid the doctrine when he took an aggressive stand against the evil empire by backing freedom fighters from around the world who were struggling against the left-wing communist jackboot. As a result, the Soviet Union and its satellites imploded in considerable and unexpected setback to the international communist edifice. Now let me go back and explain a little bit what that just meant. I remember when Reagan brought up the term Star Wars. It was a big thing. It was supposed to be a national defense shield to protect the United States from a nuclear attack from Russia using satellites and such. And I remember seeing archived videos of Reagan at some point. I think it might have been during his second term. It might have been his first, but that's irrelevant. But he did come out and say that they had successfully tested the Star Wars system. And what that did is it freaked the Soviets out to the point where they spent some 3/4 of every ruble on national defense to try and counter it. But they ended up going bankrupt, and that's when Communist Soviet Union, Socialist Soviet, it was the USSR, the United Socialist Soviet Republic. It collapsed. They couldn't handle, pouring all that money into their defense. Next, step 3. Develop the illusion that total disarmament by the U.S. would be a demonstration of moral strength. Now, there's a note here. The nuclear freeze advocates supported a freeze on American nuclear development only. Rarely were Soviet nukes or those of other nations mentioned in their self-righteous tirades. The same advocates now calling for reducing American military might, claiming that there is something immoral about America preserving its military preeminence in the world. In other words, these liberals, the Democrats, are trying to turn us into a nation of wussies. Number 4, permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation and regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. Note, today there are calls to end the embargo on the slave island of Cuba. There were complaints about the embargo against Iraq, and the U.S., not Saddam Hussein, was blamed for suffering of the Iraqi people. Would they have advocated for free trade when Hitler and his nationalist socialist regime, with his nationalist socialist regime? 5. Extend long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. Now, let me stop here for a second. Do you see a pattern here? Everything is geared towards favoring Russia. And as it states here, Soviet satellites. Soviets never disappeared. It's just a new package with a different color logo. It's like the old saying, like you see on a product, different look, same great taste, right? Well, in this case, same look, same nasty taste. So the Democrats, what's their biggest thing right now they're pushing with Trump? Oh, he's been colluding with the Russians. Well, shit. What did Hillary Clinton do? She went over and got with Russia and sold 20% of the uranium our uranium to the Russians. But yet somehow they're trying to sit there and flip the script by saying that Trump did or is colluding with Russia. Joseph Goebbels from Nazi Germany once said, he was the propaganda minister, he says, accuse the other side of that which you do. I've got a thing on my hard drive here, a folder full of memes, and one of them was this Joseph Goebbels comment that I just made. Moving on. Number 6, provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. Note, such aid and trade over decades contributed greatly to the left-wing communist liquidation of over 100 million people worldwide, according to the well-documented Black Book of Communism. This aid and trade marks a shameful chapter in American history. Without the aid and trade, the left-wing international communist behemoth would have imploded on its own rot a lot sooner, and umpteen millions would have been saved from poverty, misery, starvation, and death. And that's the key right there. That's the whole premise of communism or socialism that this left is trying to shove down our throats. They are so mentally depraved and ignorant and stupid that all they want to do is promote poverty, share in the misery, starve, and kill people. I mean, that's it. I mean, some of these elites like George Soros and all them call us worthless eaters. So now you got these idiots, these leftist idiots running around the nation as useful idiots. As if you know your history, you've heard the term useful idiots, thinking that when all is said and done, they're going to get a piece of the pie. Well, let me tell you how communism works. Once you get your useful idiots to do your work for you, then you eliminate them too, aside from your opponents. Once your opponents are gone, then you wipe out the useful idiots. And that's how you gain control. Number 7, grant recognition of Red China. Oh, how about that? Another communist country. Grant recognition of Red China and admission of Red China to the UN. Note, if anybody has any history knowledge, not only did President Jimmy Carter fulfill this goal, but he also betrayed America's allies in Nicaragua, El Salvador, Iran, Afghanistan, Angola, and elsewhere. So, leftists, liberals, Democrats are worthless. They ruin everything they touch, and they screw everything up. Take a look at the last election. After this election, the entire party has imploded. It has blown itself up. They're a bunch of old people. They don't have any new, fresh faces with any fresh ideas to win. They have nobody to stand up to represent the party. Oh, they got these old cronies. I mean, have you realized that a lot of these elites, these leftist elites in Congress, I mean, they're old as dirt. 70, 80 years old. And a lot of them been working as Congress people for years with a salary of somewhere around like 174,000 a year, but when they retire, they're millionaires. What the hell's going on, right? Right. 7 or 8. Set up East and West Germany. Okay, this was about the time when I served in the Cold War. This is Cold War stuff. Set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in '55 to settle the Germany question by free elections under supervision of the UN. Well, that didn't happen, did it? Didn't happen until October of 1989, because I was there in Germany when the wall went down. Number 9, prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the U.S. has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. 10, allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN. Again, you're seeing the pattern. The communists in the U.S. are hell-bent on forming and somehow becoming a part of or friends of the former Soviet or Russia today. 11. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. Let me tell you, I worked for the UN. I worked on a UN mission over in Macedonia. The UN is a freaking joke. This was the time when Yugoslavia broke up and Serbia was, being considered the big enemy while everybody was fighting against everybody. But when we worked for the UN, we couldn't even defend ourselves. We had to get UN permission, but we would never get it. We were effectively effeminate soldiers, so to speak. What were we going to do? What were we supposed to do? We couldn't shoot back. We're supposed to use harsh language? Okay, as its only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. Now this starts leaning into a lot of biblical prophecy in this regard. There are still American intellectuals and elected members of Congress who dream of an eventual one-world government, who view the UN, founded by communists such as Alger Hiss, the first Secretary General, as the instrument to bring this about. World government was also the dream of Adolf Hitler and Joseph Stalin. World government was the dream of Osama bin Laden and the 9/11 hijackers. So 9/11 apparently was to help shove the United States into a one-world government to facilitate this. Number 12, resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. Note, while the idea of banning any political party runs contrary to notions of the American freedom and liberty, notions that are exact opposite of those held by the left-wing communists themselves, nevertheless, these goals sought to undermine the constitutional obligation of Congress to investigate subversion. The weakening of our government's ability to conduct such investigations led to the attack of 9/11. 13. Do away with loyalty oaths. Note, it is entirely proper to appropriate for our government to expect employees paid by the American taxpayer to take an oath of loyalty. 14. Continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. Well, there again, there's another Russia. You just can't separate Democrats from the Russians. They are the party of betrayal. They need to be dealt with. 15. Capture one or both of the political parties in the U.S. Note, in his book, Reagan's War, Peter Schweitzer demonstrates the astonishing degree to which communists and communist sympathizers have penetrated the Democratic Party. In his book, Schweitzer writes about the presidential election of 1979. 16. Use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. Well, how about that? How about that? Could that be something similar to when Trump just nominated that person to the Consumer Protection Agency, and now the libtards are up in arms about that? Things that make you go, Note, this strategy goes back to the founding of the American Civil Liberties Union by Fabian socialists Roger Baldwin and John Dewey and communists William Z. Foster and Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, among others. Now this one here is not going to surprise you, but it's here. 17. Get control of the schools. Okay, so that means, preschool, middle school, junior high, high school, and then colleges. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. In other words, make them freaking stupid. Get control of teachers' associations. Well, hell, the professors themselves are bastions for communism anyways. And they're the ones teaching the kids communism. Put the party line in textbooks. So that's how you get Common Core. Common Core is a part of number 17 there as well. So, well, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Number 18, gain control of all student newspapers. Again, that's another reason why the college campuses are absolutely out of control. The communists have subverted completely our universities and academia. Use student riots, that's going on today, to foment public protests against programs or organizations that are under communist attack. Note, the success of these goals from a communist perspective is obvious. Is there any doubt this is so? 20. Infiltrate the press. CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS. Yeah, there you go. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy making positions. 21. Gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. There you go, Hollywood. But guess what? Hollywood's imploding. 22. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substantiating shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. Now, I want to stop right there for a second. That's interesting. Eliminate all sculptures from parks and buildings. So that goes hand in hand now that I see this with the recent removal of these generals from the Civil War of the South, and they were claimed or deemed to be, racist and all that stuff. This is all communist garbage. It's lies, and this is playing right from their playbook. I got their playbook right here, and it's happening right before our eyes. Okay, 23. Control art critics and directors of art museums. I could care about, museums. I really don't visit museums, but still, it's important. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. Well, Paul Joseph Watson of InfoWars talked about how repulsive and stupid and meaningless that art is today. Eliminate all governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and free press. That's number 24 of the 45 communist rules in their playbook. 25. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Now, right there, I want to stop. I remember Paul Harvey did a show, and in it, he was reading If I Were the Devil. And he says, promoting, debasing morality, or breaking it down and promoting pornography and obscenity in books. He even mentioned that specifically. And magazines and motion pictures and radio and TV. All this stuff is happening right before our eyes. Now there's a note here. This is the Gramscian agenda. Gramscian, Gramscian agenda of the Long March through the institutions, spelled out explicitly. Gradual takeover of the means of communication, and then using those vehicles to debauch the culture and weaken the will of the individual to resist. Now here we go. Here's another one. This is from the LGBT. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. Today, those few who still have the courage to advocate public morality are denounced and viciously attacked. Most Americans are entirely unwitting regarding the motives behind this agenda. Number 27. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Note, this has been largely accomplished through the communist infiltration of the National Council of Churches, Conservative and Reform Judaism, and the Catholic seminaries. 28. Eliminate prayer or any phase of religious expression in the schools on the grounds that it violates the principles of separation of church and state. Now let me teach you guys something about separation of church and state for a minute. It's not in the Constitution. It's not in the Bill of Rights. The phrase separation of church and state was simply written in a stupid letter by Thomas Jefferson to another man, and that's all it was. But somehow or other, the Democrats grabbed a hold of it, and through ignorance of we, the conservatives, we've allowed this mantra of separation of church and state to happen. 29. Discredit the American Constitution by calling it inadequate, old-fashioned, out of step with modern needs, a hindrance to cooperation between nations on a worldwide basis. And that's what they're doing now. That is absolutely what they're doing now. This is the stuff that these leftist, I don't know what, I just want to say what I want to say, but I'll just say the leftists and keep it clean. That's what they're doing on these college campuses. They're regurgitating these talking points. It's like I'm reading, I feel like I'm actually reading the entire concept of colleges today. If you go by these 45 rules in college, you get a degree. Boy, ain't that something. Okay, 30. Discredit the American founding fathers. Present them as selfish aristocrats who had no concern for the common man. 31. Belittle all forms of American culture and discourage the teaching of American history on the ground that it was only a minor part of the quote-unquote big picture. Give more emphasis to Russian history since the communists took over. You see how this revolves? This keeps coming back around to Russia with the communism. I'm telling you, folks, we need to outlaw Democrats. They need to be outlawed, obliterated. They are the cancer, the scourge of this country. Here's a note. Obliterating the American past with its antecedents in principles of freedom, liberty, and private ownership is a major goal of the communists then and now. 32. Support any socialist movement to give centralized control over any part of the culture, education, social agencies, welfare programs, mental health clinics, etc. You see what they're doing here? 33. Eliminate all laws or procedures which interfere with the operation of the communist apparatus. 34. Eliminate the House Committee on Un-American Activities. 35. 34 might be a reason why Congress are full of wimps. That's why Trump's having a hard time, because they're trying to subvert him, but subverting the country as a whole and the populace who voted for him, for Trump. 35. Discredit and eventually dismantle the FBI. 36. Infiltrate and gain control of more unions. 37. Infiltrate and gain control of big business. 38. Transfer some of the powers of arrest from the police to social agencies. Now, I probably wouldn't be too far-fetched in the terms of common sense to say that the powers like of Child Protective Services to come out and arrest or take children away and such, I think it's happening right before our eyes. Treat all behavioral problems as psychiatric disorders which no one but psychiatrists can understand or treat. Well, now you see how that happens? Now psychiatrists are going to be like masters or leaders who can dictate who's sick and who's not, who's got treatable disease and who's not, but keep it hidden from others who are otherwise intelligent enough to figure stuff out. Keep it hidden. Subversion, in other words. Note, the Soviets used to send social misfits, quote unquote, and those deemed politically incorrect to massive mental institutions called gulags. The Red Chinese called them Lao Gai. Hitler called them concentration camps. 39. Dominate the psychiatric profession and use mental health laws as a means of gaining coercive control over those who oppose communist goals. Now, I remember during Obama's, I think it was his first term, when there was this big thing about mental health services going in and they arrested or they took a veteran, I believe he was in Virginia, and took his guns, and they held him in a mental institution. And this was a way that Obama was trying to enact this by letting the dominant psychiatric profession using mental health laws and stuff to coerce control over our returning veterans. Because I'll tell you what, we veterans have millions of dollars of training. We know how to fight. We know how to combat back to save our country. They don't want that. They don't want anybody standing in their way completely. So there's a notes on this one as well on 39. Psychiatry remains a bulwark of the communist agenda of fostering self-criticism and docility. 40. Discredit the family as an institution. Well, there you go. Encourage promiscuity and easy divorce. Note, it's been done. The sovereign family is the single most powerful obstacle to authoritarian control. I'm tired. I didn't sleep well last night. 41. Emphasize the need to raise children away from the negative influence of parents. Well, I've heard Alex Jones talk about that. Here it is in writing. Attribute prejudices, mental blocks, and retarding of children to suppressive influence of parents. In other words, ADHD, like attention deficit disorders, autism, that kind of stuff. It's all, excuse me, I'm just going to come out and say it's all bullshit science. Psychology and psychiatry is all bullshit sciences. Note, outcome-based education, values clarification, or whatever they're calling it this year. So they're going to change it. It'll keep changing. They'll change the terms to suppress or to hide what their doings and what their objectives are. Create the impression that violence and insurrection are legitimate aspects of the American tradition. Black Lives Matter, Antifa. That students and special interest groups should rise up and make a united force to solve economic, political, and social problems. So, in other words, Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all that, they're trying to create this impression that what they're doing is they're trying to solve an economic, political, and social problem, which is our president, Donald Trump. All they do is destroy shit. That's all Democrats do, is destroy. They can't build shit. They can't keep their party together. So they've infiltrated the Democratic Party and have systematically, either willfully or out of their control, destroyed their own party. Now, under 42, there's a note. This describes the dialectical fostering of group consciousness and conflict, which furthers the interests of authoritarianism. 43. Overthrow all colonial governments before native populations are ready for self-government. So I can see what that happens. If they can overthrow the government before we can fix it, like with Trump, then they can shove us into this global government. Number 44. Internationalize the Panama Canal. Number 45, repeal the Conley Reservation so the U.S. cannot prevent the World Court from seizing jurisdiction over domestic problems. Give the World Court jurisdiction over domestic problems. Give the World Court jurisdiction over nations and individuals alike. And even Alex Jones has talked about this. He gave a warning during Obama's administration. His concern was, and his warning was, is that he felt through his sources that Obama was going to try and hand over, and he tried hard to turn the United States, the authority to control the United States, over to the United Nations. So I'm telling you folks, Democrats suck. Democrats have nothing positive to add to society. Their sole function is to be insane, to destroy America, and to obey their overlords, because none of them can think for them damn selves. They got to go to college to be told what to be offended by, what to say, talking points. You know the reason why liberals, Democrats, can't have an honest conversation with somebody else? Because they only go by a set determined talking points. And once you bring the discussion outside the realm of these talking points, they're lost. They're lost. They don't know what to do, so they're taught to get pissed off, to scream, to yell, to punch, attack physically and violently in many cases, to shut any dissent down. I would like to know what our good forces in government will do about this issue, because there should be a lot of people arrested. I mean, that would be all of Chicago, Detroit, New York, L.A., Oregon, Washington State. They are a cancer. They are cockroaches. They have no purpose than other spreading disease and cancer around, and they need to be dealt with. My grandfathers fought against the socialists. I stood against the socialists. Hey, it looks like it's going to have to come time again. But when you deal with leftists, they're wimps when you get them alone. But when they get into a group, they get that mob mentality. They'll go out and 50 of them will beat up one guy and act like, there's some big tough guys. But when you get them alone, I've seen the videos of some of the some non-leftists against them beating the tar out of these liberal simp cucks. That's all they are. They're just these little skinny millennials that when they get together in a group, they've got the mob mentality, but when you get them alone together and you get ready to pound them into a fine powder, they'll curl up in a ball and piss themselves. Anyhow, these were the 45 communist goals, and a lot of them are done. Some they're trying to force, and some have yet to be done, but there they are. They're all there. So, hey, this is Chris, and I thank you for your time and listening. I hope this has been informative, because I tell you, it blew me away when I read this. And it looks like it's a companion to the book I read, The Naked Communist. So, I've got it on PDF. I might put it out for free download. I don't know, because I got it for free. Anyway, you guys have a great one, and I hope this has been an educational and informative little talk here. But you guys have a great day, and take care. Bye now.